So welcome back, and now we are going to move through this second video as we talk about the 4 primary stages of responsibility for the service. The first thing I want to start with is premarital counseling or preparation. Premarital counseling, premarital preparation is a requirement. It is required by the Book of Discipline, and it is not a luxury. More recently, I've been thinking about the counseling part of getting ready for a wedding and reflected this way. There's really not much that we will do in this front end that will really significantly impact what the marriage will look like in the years that it comes. But everything that we do in this premarital piece, this preparation time, this counseling time, will do a couple things. One is it will give the couple an opportunity to engage in conversations with one another that they may not have had the courage to do or have even come to mind for them to do. And it's useful in the growing of their relationship with each other as they step into this time. The second thing relates to my experience as a pastor over now 33 years, and that is I would rather do a good job on the front end than the many times that I have been faced with couples who have come to my office to announce to me and to talk with me about getting divorced. I think anything that we can do on the front end to help avoid that second thing happening is really, really important. I've also discovered that in premarital preparation, I establish a different kind, a deeper relationship with the couples that have come. And we all know that every marriage will hit some bumps and will come into some rough places. Because you have done a good job on the front end with getting to know the couple, establishing a relationship through this preparation period, people will come to know that you are a person they can come to, that they can trust, that will be an opening to them when they hit those bumpy stretches along the way. So really, as you officiate a wedding, you're making a long-term investment in your relationship with this couple as their pastor. So as we think about premarital counseling and preparation, as I have said, the Book of Discipline requires that pastors give due counsel to the parties involved prior to agreeing to perform a wedding ceremony. While there's no agreement on the definition about what due counsel means, there are some parts that I think are really, really necessary. And just to give you a quick run of the kinds of things that would be touched on in premarital preparation are things like conflict management and resolution, good communication skills, some conversation about how finances will operate in the life of their marriage. What about children? Have they talked about whether they will become parents, and if they decided they do want to be parents, do they have the same concept about what size of family it would look like? Interesting, that is a big piece that comes into one of those bumps in marriages. One might come from a large family and want to have 5 or 6 kids, and one comes from a small family and thinking 1 or 2 is the right number. They have to kind of have some sense of understanding and agreement on that. One of the other really important pieces to talk about is power in relationships. An unhealthy marriage will be one in which either the husband or the wife exercises and has more power in the relationship. So it's really important to explore what it means to have shared power in that relationship. As a part of your preparation, you should talk about compatibility. Are they really right for each other? That's an important thing to explore. What are their expectations of one another and of their marriage? One of the pieces that is really important to talk about is their personalities and their own families of origin. Each person brings to that marriage their already preconceived notions and understandings of what a marriage looks like and what it should be based on their family of origin. And often we find that two people coming to be married have very different families of origin, and it's really important to sort that out. It's important to explore intimacy and sexuality as one of the parts of the marriage covenant with one another. And what are some of the long-term goals that they have for their marriage? What do they hope for? Where do they want to go, and where do they want to be? Now, if I was sitting in your chair, I might have just been absolutely freaked out by that list of things to do. And I think one of the important questions that we have to ask ourselves in the pastoral role is, am I qualified to do all of this? Can I do a good job of this all by myself? And it's important for us to always recognize our limitations with regard to counseling in the role of pastor. Only a handful of pastors, whether elders or deacons or local licensed pastors, have any kind of training or experience or expertise in doing counseling. And I'll just be really straight with you here. We can do more harm than good if we don't know what we are doing. So know your limitations. And because many of us are limited in what we are able to do in our expertise, there are ways to do premarital preparation that will do a good job. And I want to talk a little bit about some of those resources right now. Get help in doing this process. There's a website that is premarriageawareness.org. That's a site that you might visit, and it has a lot of resources that could be available to you as a pastor to help you work through your counseling. There's some cost to it, but it's an online kind of thing that will help you. A second resource that I think is really helpful is a resource that was written by Pastor Adam Hamilton, and it is entitled Making Love Last a Lifetime. Making Love Last a Lifetime. It's an entire curriculum on marriage and relationships, and has been recommended by several as a resource that can be adapted to guide your premarital counseling program. The curriculum itself is pretty much designed for small groups, but you can make it work for just individuals as well. Here's what I do. I have, in every church I have served, have sought out someone who is a counseling professional. Somebody who is way better at this than I am, and negotiate with that person that they would do a significant portion of the premarital preparation. And so what that typically looks like, and what my current situation at Trinity is that all of those subjects like children and power and intimacy and those kinds of things are really explored in a time with a counselor. And what I do in my preparation parts is I do what I know, and that is the spiritual aspects of what it means to be married, to be in Christian marriage, some theological reflections on that, and what it means to include the journey of faith as a part of their marriage relationship. Now, as I find these people and as I work with them, we negotiate what the exact content will be. I take a look at the resources that they use until I am satisfied. And then I always have an agreement with the couple. And that agreement goes like this. What you say and do with that counselor is between you and that person. In the event, though, that through that counseling and that preparation, the counselor or the couples begin to find a question about the viability of a long-term marriage and some problems that could exist, that together the three of them negotiate how I will be brought into that conversation. A couple of the reasons why I like to keep that kind of private with them is that when they hit those bumpy roads, they might know that there's a counselor that they can go to that they trust, right? They also, interestingly enough, people don't want to air a lot of their difficulties with their pastor. That's just a reality. That's one of the things that I've experienced over the years. They're more likely to go deeper with a counselor. But if the viability of the marriage is in question, I need to know about that. And then it gives them the power to be a part of the conversation about how will we talk to Pastor Wade about these kinds of things. So I found that to be the best approach, and that is the approach that I have used mostly. One other thing that I could offer you is premarital preparation classes. That is more of a small group kind of thing. When I served at a church in Cincinnati, we at that time did over 100 weddings a year in the church, and there is no way that we could do individual preparation for them. So 4 times a year, we put together a weekend retreat and brought in counselors and other folks to teach and hold those classes. So if you find yourself in a situation where there's just way too many weddings for you to be able to concentrate on that, but also be a pastor in your church, this might be another thing for you to think about. Whatever form you choose, the important thing is do counsel prior to the service. And that, as pastor, as licensed pastor, as elder, as deacon in the church, that is your responsibility to make sure that that happens. And so now we'll turn to the next stage in preparation for a wedding. And I find this to be one of the most exciting parts, and that is planning the wedding service itself. One of the resources that you have is this Service of Marriage Planning worksheet that you already have ahead of time. Now, this is just something that I've made over the years. I've been engaged in doing weddings for so long that I have found a number of resources that are helpful, and this is something that I just offer to you if you will find it helpful. But one of the other things that is really your friend is the United Methodist Book of Worship. So if you turn to page 116, you will see that there is an order of worship with all of the words, the vowels, the rubrics, everything in it. If you just follow what's right here in the Book of Worship, you will be successful in preparing a service. I just like to use this other resource alongside the Book of Worship to really help couples design as close to what their dream of their service would be, and do that in a way that still maintains integrity as a worship service. So if you have this resource in front of you, I'm going to just talk through the different sections of the wedding and give you just a little bit of insight as you prepare for each one of these parts. The way that I've organized this resource is that it has the major movements of each part of the service, and then there are some options that are available under that I've just found over the years. The way that it's kind of organized is that there will be a couple of options under each one, and the first one that you come to will always be the most traditional, and then it'll become a little more contemporary after that in the way that it sounds. Although what I've really realized is, even though we have contemporary worship as a significant part of the Christian life these days, that most couples, when they come to get married in the church, man, they become pretty traditional. And I've not really had a whole lot of requests for weddings that are real contemporary. So you'll have to size up your own setting and create resources that work for you if your services are going to be more contemporary in nature. What I do is I give this sheet to the couple the very first time that we sit down. I always have an initial introductory session where we get to know each other, tell each other stories, that kind of thing. And then I give them this resource. And I say, here's your assignment. Take this home, work together as a couple through this, and make choices. And then when you come back, we'll look at your choices and we will craft your service for your wedding. And what I usually say is make a date night of it. Sit down and do it together. If you do it separately, it's not going to have near the feeling and the meaning to you as it would if you had designed this together on a night. So I say, get together, get out the candles, make a nice dinner, and then sit down and plan your service. So let's walk through these portions of the service so that you'll know, have a little familiarity with each one of these parts. So the first thing we come to is a prelude. You know what that is. That's music that's being played when the guests are being seated. What I always say to the couple is, you're probably not going to hear this piece because you're going to be back in your holding room. But this is any kind of music or things that would happen as guests are being seated. The processional is the next part. That's the entrance of the wedding party and the entrance of the bride or the bride and groom. And we'll say more about that in just a little bit when we get to the rehearsal. Greeting is the greeting to the congregation as they're gathered together, followed by a prayer that will open that. And then we come to the declaration of intention. I know this sounds an awful lot like vows, but it's not quite vows yet. The history of this is that couples who wanted to declare their intention to get married, to become engaged, as we would say today, is they would come to the porch of the church and do it there in front of the priest or the pastor or the minister for that church. And this is a statement of intention. Now, we've just rolled it into the service. It's a part of the whole service now. That has changed a little bit. And you will see a variety of different options there. And one of the things that you will run into when you look at this is that in the church, we use the phrase, I will. It's an intention. It's something I intend to do. I know that on TV and in movies, they say, I do. But these are I will statements. And so you ask this question of each one of them, followed by, if so, please say I will. That's what that piece is. And then there's that address to the family of the bride and groom. Traditionally, in weddings, this has been the pastor asking the father of the bride or whoever is escorting her in, presenting her to be married. The question, and the old question used to be, who gives to be married to? And we don't believe that a human can be given to a human. So I have changed the language here. Who presents, right? And you'll see my little codes in here. B1, bride's first name. G1, groom's first name. That's what that means when you see that. Who presents to be married to? And then there are a variety of responses. Her mother and I do. My wife and I do. Whatever is appropriate for that particular couple. The other thing that I really know is that this traditional question is not appropriate in every circumstance. So that's what that number 2 section is. That's something that I rewrote a number of years ago. That really is a question that's put to the parents of both the bride and the groom that essentially invites them to begin to love and nurture the two of them as a couple together. What this does, the advantage of this is that it allows all of the parents to be, or guardians, to be participants at this part of the service, and it acknowledges that these are two families, and a bride and a groom that are coming together. It also facilitates a situation where you might be in a wedding where that first part is just it's just not appropriate for the bride, given her circumstances, her life experience, those kinds of things. You're going to have to figure out what makes the most sense and talk with a couple about that. You'll also see that I have some things in here that are marked optional. Those are just in here because historically they've been parts of wedding services, and I put them in here so I don't forget to offer that as a part of the service. So you'll see that presentation of roses to parents. For a very long time, it was a pretty strong tradition to take a moment in the service, present a rose. The groom would present a rose to the mother of the bride, and the bride would present a rose to the mother of the groom. And they would just take a moment in the service to do that. So I included that here if that is something that you want to include. Scripture, reading of Scripture. The other resource that I gave you with suggested scriptures will help guide you in this place. This is a great place to include other people in the service that the bride and groom may not have been able to ask to be in their wedding party. Maybe there's a relative or someone like that that could read scripture. Here's my word of counsel to you about that, is make sure whoever they select to read scripture will do a good job. We've all been at that wedding where a person runs up and they just buzz through the scripture reading. It had no meaning, it had no feeling, and doesn't really add to the service. So make sure that you work with whoever is reading the scriptures, that they do a really good job. And my rule of thumb is kind of like this with regard to the number of scriptures. Always at least one, minimum one, maximum of three. I've been finding that 2 is probably the maximum for a service, but somewhere between 1 and 3, got to be 1, no more than 3. The next piece you'll see there is homily. I use the word homily on purpose. I don't use the word sermon because sermon scares people. They think it's going to be your usual 25, 35-minute deal that you do on Sunday morning in a service. And I will tell you that weddings are not a place for a sermon of that length. But a homily that you offer to the bride and groom often comes out of your experience of getting to know them and your encouragement for their marriage that's grounded in their faith in Jesus. And certainly it will have be impacted by the scripture passages that they select. Then we get to the section that's the actual marriage part, right? Getting married. Exchange of vows. There are a number of suggestions made here for what those vows could look like. You will have a number of couples that will ask you if they can write their own vows. I always say yes, that's fine, but I need to approve them before they are used, just to make sure that they fulfill a basic pattern that you will see in the vows that are suggested right here. I've had some couples say to me, hey, can I memorize my vows so I don't have to repeat after you? The answer is yes. But what I have found is I think only in one case did they actually end up doing it that day. The nervousness of the day and kind of stuff. They said, hey, man, let's don't go with the memorized thing. Will you help me with that? The next place we get to is the wedding rings. You will have an opportunity to introduce the wedding ring as a symbol within the service, and then followed by a short prayer of blessing the rings, and then that exchange of the rings. We'll say more about how to do that when we get to the rehearsal part. The next piece is the pronouncement of matrimony. You'll notice that there are no choices here. In the state of Ohio, this pronunciation is legal. It has everything that's required in order to officially say and determine and declare that they are indeed married. So I don't give any options at that point. You'll see unity candle there. That's another thing that used to be pretty prevalent in services. Little service where you take 2 candles and you light one, symbolic of what is happening with them today. Quite honestly, in the last probably 5+ years, I don't think I've ever done this. This is just something that's not very common anymore. But I do put it in there as a placeholder because some people still might want to do that. The next piece I call the prayer block. That's the blessing of the marriage. Feel free to do your own thing. Use this as a guidance. Often include the Lord's Prayer. This is an opportunity also for some music to have it sung. My personal preference is for us to speak it. But some people find that having it as a solo is something that is that they like to have in their service. So we go through the prayer block, then pronounce a benediction, after which I invite the couple to kiss. I say, please don't put the word kiss in your bulletin if you make it. This is in here for you. so that you don't forget this part. Nothing more embarrassing than forgetting to let the couple kiss in the service. Move on then to the presentation of the couple. And this can happen in a variety of ways. Some people want both of their first names to be named. Some want to be Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. In many cases, there is the bride is not changing her last name. And so you would introduce them using both of their names. So that's what you would use to kind of fashion that piece. The recessional, that's how we leave the sanctuary. And then the post-salute is any kind of musical selections that they make after that. So this guide will really, really help you. If you follow this, it's almost foolproof. You'll have a great service. What you are going to bring to it is the ways that you personalize it to make it their wedding service, right? And you're only going to learn that because you get to know them better and you know some things to insert and to say that is appropriate. Just a word about ad-libbing in services. Please be very, very careful about going off the script. I've been to a number of weddings where the pastor, I don't know if they were nervous or just trying to be funny, but have said some things that are really, really inappropriate in a wedding service. So just kind of govern yourself as you think about that as you go through. And you know, like if something goes wrong in the service, and something will go wrong in every service, just roll with it, adjust, and keep going. It's going to be okay. That tends to happen. All right, I'm going to stop this video here and give you a chance to take a quick little break, and then come back and we'll move on to the next section. See you back here in just a little bit.